Good evening, everybody. We're waiting on one member that's en route, and we're going to make sure we got that person here before we get started. So they should be here in just a few minutes.
I do everything. Oh my goodness, not at all. It takes a village. Is that enough? You're welcome. Thank you. That's what I was thinking.
He's an alternate, so we got a quorum, we don't need him to fill in, so he can deliberate, he just can't.
Yeah, that's great.
I just want to make sure.
Thank you for the more like Stephen. Don't talk with them because Stephen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, we
I
already
thought
talked
so,
about that
but
on the phone.
yeah, we knew y'all have chatted, but we didn't know have chat to chat about chat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good.
It's up to you. He said a couple minutes. He said he was having to drop his daughter off somewhere. So I don't know what that means. I don't know exactly where that's at. That's why I want to make sure.
Makes a difference.
Would that be the name? Marisol Rosales.
Where's that? Once you get it going, it really does kind of take off.
Well, at least there's blood in there.
Yeah, we got all around.
I was actually told Ron.
Because I got the email, but that was during the time when I was so sick, and I said, I'm not going to put nothing on my plate.
We've even got a slow going. There's nothing hotter than drinking with your daughter. It's a winter. She's
Wasn't that kind of one of the things that planned?
you two probably are on that committee. Or pull muscle or something.
Anytime you're not right, I'm mad about it. You mad at me, that's what it is. He might as well learn it later.
All right, we'll call the Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Today is March 19th, 2019. We're a little bit late. We apologize for that. We're trying to wait on a member to make sure we got a full representative from the town here, but they are still en route, I assume, or may not be able to make it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We apologize again for making you guys wait. So we'll call the meeting to order. It's Board of Adjustment. And I'd like to welcome everyone. I'd like to get an approval of the agenda. A couple things on the agenda. We've got call to order, of course, the welcome approval. We got the minutes. We do have the variance request for 2564 Railroad Street. And then we got some information from the staff. And then if there's no other items, we'll adjourn. Can I get a motion of approval of the agenda? Mr. Reynolds, got one. Can I get a second? All right, got a second. And then also we need to go through the minutes. We went through that back in February. And I need to get an approval of the minutes. I think everyone had a chance to look through those. Any issues there? Okay. An approval? Okay. Mr. Reynolds, get a second? Ms. Willis?
Okay, I'm in.
You good?
Yeah, I got the motion and second, I get the vote. I'm sorry, can we?
Oh,
Y'all had a motion and
oh, sorry, we didn't have an emotion to go to
Did you
approval.
actually vote to approve did you get all in favor of approving the agenda?
We didn't get the all in favor. All in favor? Aye, there we go. Sorry, I
Okay,
missed
thank you,
that.
sorry, I was
Forgive us,
trying to,
guys, we're new at this.
I was trying to catch
I'm new at
up.
this. Sorry.
Okay, on the minutes, I think Mr. Reynolds made the motion
Yes,
to approve, seconded
Mr.
by
Phillips.
Mr. Phillips,
Mhm.
okay.
Gotta keep me in check, Mr. Reynolds. All right, we good?
And we just need to vote.
Did we
And
get a
the-
vote on that one too?
Yeah, can we get a vote? Approval of minutes? All in favor?
Thank you.
All right. All right, so we'll call this hearing into session, discussing the variance request for 2564 Railroad Street. We do need to get anyone that is planning to speak for or against the variance to be sworn in. So if anyone, Brian's going to help us with that, getting it in, and basically, any person who wishes to do that, present evidence for or against. If you're talking for that, we would need you guys to come up.
So who would be willing, wanting to speak tonight? So everybody just want to speak, come up here?
So you're doing one at a time, Brian, or you going to do the other?
We can do it all together.
All together? Okay.
You can do it all at one time. If everybody can sort of just touch it, there you go.
Okay.
There you go. There's plenty about it.
All right, so at this time, what we're going to do is we'll go through, basically, do you swear or affirm that the evidence you shall give to the board in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay. Thank you. All right, so we're going to get a kind of a brief overview from the staff about the variance and what's involved in that. We'll go through that, and then we will go through a few other procedural things after that, and then we'll allow anyone to speak through that as well. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always a pleasure to have two back-to-back Board of Adjustment meetings. So it's good to see everybody tonight. So before you have a request from Maris Otters, Ales, and Loggers. It's a variance request. So some site data for the property in question. So this is 2564. It's got two addresses, 2564 Railroad Street and 183 Depot Street. It's actually the property just across the street, the vacant building and the property with the large oak tree on it. You can see the parcel numbers there, 11641 and 24079. So you know it's located at the intersection of Depot and Railroad. Current zoning is central business. Total of the two tracts combined is 0.35 acres. So the variance request is for the property of 2564 Railroad Street and 183 Depot Street is requesting a variance from the property separation requirements specified in Special Requirement 23, which is ABC sales for on-premise consumption in the town of Winterville zoning ordinance. Notifications were mailed to the adjacent property owners within 100 feet on March 8th, and a variance was advertised in the Daily Reflector on March 6th and March 13th. So this is a table of permitted uses that we have in our zoning ordinance. You can see here the microbrewery and brew pub, general business. It is a permitted use, but with that permitted use comes a special requirement. That special requirement is, I'm sorry, central business. I said general business. It's central business, but it is saying permitted by right with a special requirement of 23. When you go to special requirements 23, this is the one that holds us back. So it's property separation requirements. No such establishment shall be located within 200 feet of a church, elementary or secondary school, public park, or residentially zoned property. So there's a little bit of background information. I'm going to have our economic development planner come up and just kind of give you a background information on the breweries in town of Winterville.
Good evening, Board. I'm Stephen Penn, economic developer with the town of Winterville. Back in late 2006, I was doing some research on behalf of the town on breweries, its benefits, especially to underutilized areas like old downtowns. Some of the research I found, if you look at just local examples, Trolling Wood started off Dickinson Avenue with a restaurant. Kinston's downtown really started off with Mother Earth. Rocky Mountain Mills really started off with Koi Pond. Even Duck Rabbit in Farmville brings a lot of attraction. After presenting this to the board as well as other facts, we decided to implement microbreweries and breweries in a number of different zoning districts. One of the zoning districts was Central Business District, in hopes to redevelop and re-energize the downtown area. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So as Stephen said, based on that research and the ordinance was amended in 2017 to allow breweries in the Central Business District. So just some staff information for you guys. So this is a unique situation in which the subject property is located, in which the subject property is zoned central business to allow for a brewery, and the only residentially zoned property in the downtown area falls within 200 feet. So the subject property, which is the two combined 0.35 acres zoned central business, is separated from the residentially zoned property by the most intensive zoning district we have, which is industrial. And it's a 4.6 acre tract that separates those two. And I'll show some graphics to show you guys a little bit more, to give you a little bit better understanding of that. I did also want to inform you guys that the property owner of 2585 Mill Street, which is the property in which they're trying to gain the separation requirement variance for, did stop by in person in our office to tell us he was in favor of this use for the property. So he didn't have any opposition whatsoever.
So Brian, so the actual owner that the 185 touches,
Yes, sir.
that owner is in favor, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir. So the owner of, so this is our subject property here, zone central business, the industrial property, and then there's the residential property here. This property owner actually came by our office, met with us in person, and conveyed that he was in favor of allowing the variance request in the brewery to go there. So you can see this is our downtown district, all this. So you can see it's all central business. And it extends over to this block too, with industrial here and that one outlier of a residential. So that's where that uniqueness of this situation comes into play. So downtown, by far, has no residential, just that one outlier. So just an aerial image to give you guys. There's the big tree, the building that the use will be in, the residential property, the industrial use with the plumbing, warehouse, and manufacturing. So our downtown area, Railroad Street. And this is where Main and Mill is right here, and then the Dollar General. Just a close-up image to kind of give you guys a better view. So this is kind of washed out, but I got some more coming for you. So there is a distance right there. So from the property, from the establishment to the property line, which is the way the ordinance reads, the establishment to the residentially zoned property, not the actual structure, would be anywhere from 100 to 185 feet. And from the property line to the actual structure is 14.7, which is odd when you add those together, it's actually 200 feet. So I thought was a big coincidence. So this is our future land use plan. So again, our subject property here, the property separating there, you can see that the future land use plan actually shows the residentially zoned property as industrial. So our council has envisioned this actually not being a residential property, but being the highest intense use we have. So, so just want to set some ground rules. Obviously, when when we're testifying, this is the big one. Competent material and substantial evidence is what you guys will be considering. No opinionated remarks should be considered when doing your going through the criteria. So also just want to make sure once you're only able to speak once you're properly recognized by the chair. And with that, I'll answer any questions and then allow you to open it up to whoever would come speak.
This is new business. Anticipating a lot of money for the town. Okay, a lot of traffic.
Okay.
All right, can you give me some kind of idea on which way this traffic flow may be?
So
Are they gonna be directed toward Mill Street, Brewer Street?
So our downtown, we're actually working on some new traffic patterns on this end right now. You can actually see the equipment out there right now. So you're going to actually have a flow of traffic going one way back this way and then one way this way. But the traffic pattern itself, I'm not sure it's going to create the speed of traffic won't be a concern. I think the volume of parking and cars rolling through would be, obviously. So right now we don't have any. I don't have a site analysis of traffic. This might be something the engineer or project manager could answer as well. But that's really not what we're here to consider. If the separation requirement wasn't in play, that would be one thing that would be handled during site plan review. So.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we're prepared for the evidence. If we can,
So the applicant's here and their representatives, so
okay.
I would turn it over to you guys.
All right. So if you guys will, when you come up, state your name, your address, and who you're representing, if you will, please, for the record. And also whether or not you're for or against the case as well.
Okay.
The variance.
Sorry about that.
Scare Mr. Reynolds.
Good evening. My name is Christian Porter. I'm a lawyer from Colombo Kitchen Attorneys in Greenville. We're at 1698 East Arlington Boulevard. Been a lawyer in Pitt County. Well, I'm from Pitt County, but been a lawyer here for 20 years. I am appearing tonight on behalf of the potential buyer of the property, which is Benjamin Self, and this is his wife, Amy. They would be the ones that are going to develop the property. You'll hear from them in just a few minutes about what they're planning to do so that you have some idea related to that. The proposed use, again, as you heard staff so eloquently say, if that one property in the downtown district were not zoned residential, we wouldn't be here tonight. It's because of that one unique circumstance that we're requesting the variance. It's anywhere from 180 to 185 feet to the property line. So it's approximately 10% that we're talking about as far as the variance goes. This is a nano brewery. With the chair's permission, I'd like for the Selfs to come up and just tell you about what that is so that you have some indication of what they're talking about doing with the property.
I think so.
All right.
Yep.
Hi, good evening to the board. My name is Benjamin Self. I just want to introduce myself a little bit. We live at 2260 Tulls Cove Road in that new subdivision. We've been living in Pitt County for about 5 years, and I've been in the brewing industry for about 10 years as a quality control consultant. I'm primarily concerned with product integrity, and I've worked for several breweries around the Southeast. My wife and I, Amy, we have a real vision for this property across the street. I've been doing this for several years, working for other breweries and such, but I've never had the opportunity to really put down roots of my own and make the beers that we want to make. My wife is also very passionate about them. what we see this property becoming is a hub of Winterville life. There's really no way to overstate what a quality nano brewery and tap room can do for a small community. They are a boon to young families, young professionals. These are not the type of beers and tap rooms that attract the 20-year-olds, you know, the young drinkers or anything like that. What we want to focus on is making a high-quality product. During the week, we want to be closed by 10 p.m. every night. We will never be open later than midnight. We want to be good neighbors, truth be told. We see our brewery as being very synergistic with the rest of Winterville life. Typically, since we won't be serving food at all, we'll be relying on restaurants around our district. So a typical evening for a young couple might involve coming to our brewery and having a pint of beer or two, and then going over to Main and Mill for dinner. That's how we see ourselves folding into everything. Like I said, we're pretty single-mindedly passionate about the products that we make, and I'll let my wife introduce herself as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Amaker. I'm Ben's wife. I'm also at 2260 Tolls Cove Road. I just wanted to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about myself and our plans. I have degrees in management and English, and for the past 7 years, I've worked in finance, revenue cycle management, and project implementation. However, my true passion is entrepreneurship, and I've always dreamed of owning and operating a small business. We've been looking for the right opportunity for several years, and Ben and I feel like we're in the right place now in Winterville, where we'll best be able to plug in our experience and make a small brewery successful over the long term. The market in Winterville is ready and able to accommodate this type of business that attracts young professionals and responsible craft beer drinkers like us from surrounding areas. I also wanted to say a little bit about the property. We fell in love with the look, character, and the famous green space of the property. And we also feel like it's the only one available in Winterville currently that fits our budget and space requirements. I have definitive plans to improve and preserve this property and run our business in a way that will be sustainable and mutually beneficial for years to come. Thank you.
Before we move on, I did have a question for Ben, right?
Yes.
Sorry. So the difference between nano and micro, obviously, but
We were actually, my wife and I were having a debate about this last night. To me, the difference between micro and nano is a microbrewery is big enough to where it can distribute its kegged or bottled product elsewhere. That's not us. We want to be for on-premises consumption only.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Thank you.
All right, so again, primarily the only reason that we're here is because of that distance between the residentially zoned property and this. So when we talk about a variance, you've got three different criteria that you well know that you need to deal with. There are practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships in the way of carrying out the strict letter of the ordinance on this particular piece of property. The variance is in harmony with the general purpose and the intent of the ordinance and preserves its spirit. And if you grant the variance, the public safety and welfare have been assured and substantial justice has been done. So if we want to talk about the practical difficulties related to this one particular piece of property, it is the fact that if you look at all of the downtown area and its zoning, this is the one single property within 200 feet of this parcel that's zoned residential. That is not, as staff pointed out, that is not what the long-range plan for Winterville shows. It shows it as a higher use, an industrial use. So if you look at that, then this wouldn't have been an issue. It's just that one unique property. It's also 180 to 185 feet. It's then 14.3 feet to the structure from the property line. I believe I'm right. If that the current property is, Mike, you can help me. The current property, if it were demolished and you wanted to rebuild it, the setback is not.
It would be, instead of, it would have to be
20
20
feet.
feet from the rear
Right.
property line.
So
Where it's only 14.
in its current zoning as it is, if it were to burn to the ground and somebody wanted to build a residential dwelling back there, the setback would have to be 20 feet, which would just, again, make it even further away from where it is. It's just the fact that it's an older structure and doesn't completely comply with the current ordinance as far as setbacks are concerned. That particular building has been leased off and on throughout the years. The property on the corner is vacant, has a beautiful large oak tree on it. The plan here is to develop those two properties in conjunction with each other. If there was another use, that may not be the case. I mean, you could see somebody buy the building and do something with that, somebody buy the corner and tear down the tree and build whatever they wanted to there. You have a unique opportunity here that both of these happen to be available. The property owners are here tonight just in support of that. We appreciate that, and that this is an opportunity for Winterville to see this sort of preserved, but also, move forward in a positive way for the community. The use is also in harmony with the general purpose surrounding of the variance and the ordinance, in that the surrounding area is all commercial, industrial, office. The only exception, again, is this one piece of property. We talked about the long-range plan, and it's just a 10% variance. I've got maps and things here that we could look at, but I don't think it's necessary. You saw the picture that staff put up. If it were a little bit lighter, you could look out the window and see everything. And then public safety and welfare. I don't think you could get a site that would be much closer to the police station or anything like that. I mean, you've got municipal right across the street. From a public safety standpoint, from what you've heard from the sales, the type of use that they're talking about here is not to attract keg drinkers and things like that are going to create problems. It is intended to be something for the community that is a drawing card that will bring people to downtown Winterville and come in, have a drink, and then go to restaurants and other areas and spend additional money. Any questions about anything or anything else that we can offer?
Any questions from the board? Mm-hmm.
You're saying it's 180 feet from the building to the property line?
185.
180 to 185, depending on where you measure from. And you, I guess, could put that slide back up.
14.7 feet.
From yeah, there it is.
The building, the house is, you can't use that, because it's from property line to the building.
If you went from the property line to the building, it's 180.1 or 185.3, depending upon where you measure. And that's why we're here, because 200 feet is what the ordinance requires. Again, it's within approximately 10%.
And to help you, the way our ordinance reads is that you have to measure the distance from the structure, which you see on the right is from the building, to the property line of the
Residentially zoned property, I
so
think is the way.
but what they've shown you is actually, if you were to measure it all the way to the structure, that's where the other 14.7 feet come in.
And again, if that structure were to comply with current setbacks, it would have to be 20 feet from the property line in that zoning classification.
Well, my only problem is, we're bringing that probably the other way, but so, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, sir. So anybody else in favor would like to speak? That would be the time, please. Thanks. Please make sure you state your name and I assume for.
I am for.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I'm Mike Baldwin, Baldwin Design Consultants, 1700D. East Arlington Boulevard, and it's just a coincidence that my office is next door to Christian's. But all I have is one point to add, and I think it is very significant in this case. This property has been leased many times to different people. What we have tonight is an opportunity for young people who are going to buy this property, who are going to add to the tax base of Winterville. And I think I sat and met with Christian and Andy Piner and Amy and Ben last Monday for an hour and a half. I have never met a person more knowledgeable than Ben and Amy, per sons, and Ben with his chemical engineering degree that knows more about this business that he is pursuing than this gentleman here. And that when you have somebody who is knowledgeable, you have somebody who's going to obey all the rules. So with that, the fact you've got a young couple, you've got a vibrant community with a young couple who wants to help that community. These people's hearts are in it. And a lot of times, I handle a lot of rezonings. Most of the time it's in Greenville. And I come for them a lot of times from a personal side. When I know a lot of the variance is legalistic side. But you've got a good opportunity here for the town of Winterville. I'll be glad to answer any of the questions.
Mr. Reynolds, you have any questions?
Well, I have one problem. And one problem I have, the brewery, I have no problem with that. If we change the variance, to include this, what is it going to have on the future?
Well, this is specifically for this property only, for this property, so we would only, at that point, if someone else decided to go into another situation, they'd have to come back before the board again, am I correct with that?
I think I can help you out with that, Mr. Reynolds. So I think what you're asking is this is going to set a precedence.
Right.
That's where I think the uniqueness of a situation comes into play. So that would be something for you guys to determine whether or not this is a unique enough situation that it wouldn't create wouldn't be an outlier, or would be an outlier, so it wouldn't create that precedent. So every time somebody wants to do something, they just come before you guys. Staff does believe it's a unique situation. That's why the variance request was accepted. And I'll leave it at that. So I don't think this would set a precedence. I think this is a unique enough set of circumstances that you'd be hard pressed to find another one exactly like this. So
Brian, one other question, if you can click back to the zoning of that, back a little bit on where you had the chart, the matrix of, their use types. So in that situation, there would have to be a lot of other items that would be checked off before this could be put in, say, a neighborhood, right? But you couldn't even get to that point.
Oh, yeah. So
I'm trying to help Mr. Reynolds understood. So
right.
The fact that it's downtown in the central business district is probably what.
And so, and it's probably pretty obvious, but that's why this special requirement's put there. So you don't want a brewery or a bar sitting in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So that would be the uniqueness of the situation. It's actually in downtown. So, I mean.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks, Brian. All right. Anyone else like to speak in favor of the variance?
Good evening. I'm Andy Piner. I live at 511 Daventry Drive in Greenville. I have an office right there off of Red Banks Road. I have worked with Johnny on listing the property, and also through that, Brian and Amy came to look at the property and really fell in love with it. And before it was over, then the question was asked, well, what about the property next door? And I really think the combination of that property next door was really what sold the property. And I think Ben's comment was that the tree's a label. In other words, it is a very unique property. We do not only having a real estate brokerage company. My primary employment is real estate appraisals. And we do property valuations. I'm doing some right now in your community. I've done doing some right now on Elms, Mill Street, some down on Main Street a little bit further away. So I know a little bit about Winterville, and you have a wonderful community. And we have the privilege of traveling to other towns. And I see this trend going in many other locations. About a year ago, I was in Edenton with the town council, and there's an ice house downtown near the waterway, but also near the park, if you're familiar with Edenton, and but also near the historic district. The property was an old ice plant, what it originally was, but the used right of Raleigh was anticipating doing something very similar to this. Just last week, I had a call from the mayor in Washington, down on Stewart Parkway, next to the historic district. Somebody was looking to go into, if you drive downtown, there's that, it's called those grain bins or something like that, but people were trying to redo something like that into something like this. So it is a trend. It is a trend, and it's a positive trend. It's a positive trend that I see in a lot of locations. But I also see your downtown. Y'all have a small downtown. It's a concise one, but it's a wonderful. There's some wonderful opportunities within your downtown area. And I think as your downtown area grows, you're going to see Mill Street. That whole intersection of Main and Mill is a tremendous location. Going out from Mill Street to Highway 11 is going to be a good corridor. You've got some positives. I think this would be a tremendous catalyst to help that along. And so for that, I certainly do appreciate your support on this.
Is anyone else in favor would like to speak? Okay. Anyone opposed that would like to speak against this variance? Okay. All right. So it sounds like there's no one opposed to the variance. So we'll move on to any questions from the board at this point. And Brian,
All right, so you guys are tasked with making the decision now whether or not to grant the variance. I will point out that Keene probably has some good information for you on criteria number one, looking at what our ordinance says and what the state statute says, and I'll let him explain a little bit further on that.
Yeah, just a tidbit on this, it hopefully will be helpful. If you look at A1, it seems to be a little strict, if you will. It says if he complies with the provisions of the ordinance, the property owner can secure no reasonable return from or make no reasonable use. And it sort of implies that if there is another use, then you don't have to grant the variance because there's something else that can be done. And if you look at the statute, which we of course read this, our ordinance in conjunction with the statute, it says unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. It shall not be necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made. So it's okay, in other words, that there are other uses. I think your challenge is to say, well, there are other uses, but if we deny that the variance, that would be an unnecessary hardship because it would be unfair to take away from them the use that they want to do and sort of relegate them to maybe a lesser use. I think sometimes when we read this, it's easy to get confused to say, well, if there is another return, if there is another use, then the variance is denied, and I don't think that's correct. I've worked with you on a couple of these, and we've talked through this. You might remember that. So I just always want to remind you what the statute says. Statute's a little more lenient, and I think we need to remember what the statute says as we move forward.
Yeah. At this point, are there any questions for any of the folks on the board? So I guess summarize, basically, we've got a property that you got 185.3 feet from the property line, but the variance in the long-term plan says that will not be an issue, is what we're hearing from this. Is that correct? Is that kind of where we're headed on that?
I think you summed it up pretty well. I mean,
yeah.
I think the ultimately the property looks to be zoned.
That's
The-
right.
The plan is for it to be zoned industrial, which will remove the whole issue if it were
That's correct.
resolved. It's just
So it would not
residential.
necessarily be a precedent at that point, so, okay. So a couple things, any questions from Mr. Phillips? Anything? Ms. Rollins? All right, so there's a couple things we'll go through at this point. At this point, I believe we would go through the variance requests here, or the actual requirements. So I'm just going to read this, so bear with me. So the Board of Adjustment shall authorize upon appeal in specific cases such variances from the terms of the ordinance as will not be contrary to the public interest where owning to special conditions a literal enforcement of the provisions of this ordinance will, in an individual case, result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship, as Mr. King was talking about, Mr. Lasher was talking about, excuse me. So that the spirit of the ordinance shall be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and the substantial justice done. Such variance may be granted in such an individual case of unnecessary hardship where the Board of Adjustment makes the following affirmative findings. So there's three parts of that. And the first part is there are practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships in the way of carrying out the strict letter of the ordinance. Right, so we go through, there's 4 criteria for that. And we'll need approvals on each one of these, right?
I would suggest that we get a vote on each criteria.
Okay, and we're also gonna need a second to that as well. So in the first case, if he complies with the provisions of the ordinance, the property owner can secure no reasonable return from or make no reasonable use of his property. We affirm, okay, approval? Yep. Second, okay. The hardship results.
Well,
We got all
Get
in
it?
favor.
All in favor,
Yeah.
sorry, aye. Sorry about that, getting
Sorry.
ahead of myself. All right, the hardship results from the application of the ordinance. Get a motion? Yep, Mr. Phillips? All in favor?
Oh, can we slow down just one tab?
Sorry.
So I got Mr. Phillips and Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. Reynolds was
Okay.
first, and
Thank
Mr.
you.
Phillips, and then on the second one, Mr. Phillips, and
And then Mr.
Mr.
Reynolds.
Reynolds.
And then
Yeah.
approved, right?
approved on the second
Okay.
one.
Thank you.
The hardship is suffered by the applicant's property. Motion? Portion? Second. All in favor? Aye. Affirmed, okay. The hardship is not a result of the applicant's own actions. Mr. Reynolds? Mr. Phillips? All in favor? Aye. Okay, so there's 2 more pieces to it. One more piece. The hardship is peculiar to the applicant's property. Motion. All in favor? Aye. That was Ms. Willis and Mr. Reynolds. All right, and then final 2 are the variances in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance and preserves its spirit. Motion. Mr. Phillips, all in favor? Aye. And then finally, C, in granting the variance, the public safety and welfare have been assured and substantial justice has been done. Okay, Mr. Phillips. Excuse me, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Reynolds, and then Mr. Phillips, all in favor? Aye, sorry. All right. So the motion approved, or variance approved. Do we
So
need all
with-
in favor there? or no?
With the findings and all affirmative, then the variance request will be granted.
All in favor? Aye.
All right,
All
good
right.
deal.
All right, so I think we've completed the variance application is approved for the 2564 Railroad Street. And then new business, any other items? I don't think there's any other items that we have tonight.
No, I just had some informational stuff just to keep you guys informed as a board. So as some of you guys know, we're doing the land use plan. We're coming along really well on that. We've had a couple 3 steering committee meetings and a public charrette with a visioning session. We had about 100 people come through here in a 3-day period. Went really well. We got some really good information. I encourage you guys to keep up with it on our website. There's a dedicated page for it. If you haven't taken the survey yet, take the survey. Get that information back to us. We got some upcoming stuff with the Worthington Road corridor study. So I may be tapping you guys on the shoulder to help with that. But a lot of good stuff coming up. Winterville's growing, and we are trying to make sure we got the right plans in place to make sure it happens accordingly. So, yes, sir, Mr. Reynolds.
But you said we were working
It's the comprehensive land use plan. So, yeah, so it's going to update our future land use plan. So obviously the outskirts of town are seeing a lot of growth, so.
Okay, if we want to make do it on Railroad Street, can we not make Railroad Street continuous all the way?
It's a battle we fight with the railroad all the time. I know what you mean, but it's one of those things that it's a battle with the railroad company. It's not one we're apt to win at most times. So I don't know. It's a good. Oh, you're talking about down by Cradles. So you're saying remove that stop sign, or?
I'll just add my 2 cents. There's been a whole lot of talk at town meetings about Railroad Street on both sides, and I think there's, if I recall right, there's unfortunately some speeding that goes on that street. So the stop signs are put up just try to slow people down.
You know, you decide that the school's on, I say no, don't change that.
Right.
But I see people come into the stop on Runaway Road, go straight across. A lot of people want to use that road coming into town. Instead of, go up, that'd be my neighborhood, which I'm trying to eliminate now, because traffic is so backed up. That would help the flow.
Okay.
So if you bring it, when you get meeting, I will.
I think that'd be a great
Yeah,
idea. Come to the town meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, Mr. Mills, there is traffic analysis that goes along with our planning, so they look at those things downtown. So we've got a traffic engineer company that's working with our consultant, so maybe we can bring that to their attention and get some ideas.
Wait, Ken, are we talking about the stop sign beside the church?
So-
I think Mr. Reynolds saw that stop sign on Millstone, on Railroad
Railroad.
Street by Cradle. He says-
The one where it intersects with Tyson?
Yes.
I think
That's a fairly new stop sign that was erected as a result of a study we did do from the police department at the request of Reverend Turnage at the church there and some surrounding property owners. So that hadn't been there long.
Well, no, what else we done, at least 3 years.
Well, it may have been 3 years. That's not long to me.
Relatively speaking.
But
that's-
yes, we're talking about the same one.
But that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, and thank you for all that presented this evening. Good luck to you. Thank you for you guys' attendance. Apologize, we got a little late. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. Reynolds, second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Wow.
I was just curious about the nano versus micro. I didn't realize I was thinking just the opposite. I was thinking just the opposite. Like the micro was like the one that stays there. Okay, so that's good. Awesome. Yes, sir. Good to see you. Stuff. Let me know how you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think y'all
What's that?
enjoyed meeting this guy. I did. The first thing he said, he said, that's
I was happy to see Maine and Mill come down. It was pretty decent.
He said,
I just had the hamper. I went in one night, just set it hard, and ate dinner.
My sister May.